Got all dressed up for you.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm all set.
Do you need the laptop, or do you want to start doing the codes?
Good morning. You're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Mubaraka Ibrahim, and you're listening to Mornings with Mubaraka. We are streaming live on the New Haven Independent Facebook page, as well as newhavenindependent.org or MWM Radio on Facebook. So you can catch us on either of those three. And I want to welcome you to the show. You're listening to Mornings with Mubaraka, where we talk about national issues from a local level through a lens of diversity. Today we are talking about what, in my research for the show, it appears to be much of a national crisis. I was like, wow, this is a national crisis. From a person who has children who are like, the youngest is 16 now, so this is not like a current issue for me, but I'm like, geez, this is a real problem. We're talking childcare, people. We're talking about being able to afford childcare. We're talking about quality childcare. I was looking up some stats about childcare. The United States apparently is pretty much the only industrialized country that does not require employees to provide any paid parental leave. So that means if you have a baby, you woohoo, your employer gives you to time off, but that is not paid. So that is, and the average cost of childcare is pretty expensive. And, at most employers allow people to take about 12 leaves. I found like 12 weeks leave for paternal or maternal leave after a child is born. So that means that by the time your child is 3 months old, you have to find quality childcare. And that's not an easy feat. The average cost of enrolling a child age 4 or younger in full-time child care center in America, according to care.com, is $9,589 a year. That is literally what it costs to send someone to a state college. So, this morning, Southern Connecticut State University, 1 year of Southern is less than like $100 more than that. It's only about $10,000 to send somebody to the college, and this is what you're paying to enroll your child just for someone to take care of them. And then infants cost even more. So this morning we are talking to two women who have taken on this feat to change the trend of childcare, both in its quality and in its policies as well. So welcome Jana and Jane from All Our Kin. Thank you for joining me, ladies.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, Mubaraka, we're really excited to be here.
Awesome. All Our Kin is a nonprofit organization that supports and sustains community childcare providers to ensure that children and families have the foundation they need to succeed in school and in life. Through their program, childcare professionals succeed as business owners with access to training and education opportunities, as well as gaining a livable wage and benefit. Jana Wagner is a New Haven, our New Haven own, born and raised in New Haven. She has quite a lengthy bio. Of course, she receives all the accolades for both being from New Haven. She is Yale. She's a graduate of Yale University, and has received awards for building between Yale and the community, building community relations, as well as multiple entrepreneurial business awards. So thank you for coming. And the founder, one of the founders of All Our Kin, right? And Jane, she's the economic development. I'm gonna look. I thought I had a consultant. for all our kin. Also, a longtime New Haven resident. And thank you for joining me as well. So, tell me a little bit about. So, Jana, starting with you, how did you come up with the idea for All I Can? You say all businesses are here to solve a problem, or all products solve a problem. What was the problem that you saw that you tried to solve when you came up with the idea of All I Can?
Sure. So Jessica Sager is my partner in crime at All Our Kin, and she was at Yale Law School studying the 1996 welfare laws, which changed welfare as we know it. That was a law that President Bill Clinton enacted that really altered the welfare laws and really impacted single moms on public assistance. It required them to work to receive their benefits. And so that meant that moms who had young children had to find work, but there were very limited quality childcare options for them available in their community. So Jessica thought that a good solution to a really horrible problem would be to create a childcare cooperative where moms on public assistance could come with their babies to our childcare and learn how to be early educators. So they would spend half of their day in our lab school, learning how to be a childcare provider with their own children. And then the other half of the day, they would be in class with me, learning the theory of child development, how children grow and learn, curriculum. And what was great about that was that it was a lab school. So if we were talking about 2-year-olds and how egocentric they are and how they say no and don't and they drive you nuts, we could go downstairs and there were lots of 2-year-olds saying no, don't, grabbing toys. And it was a great way to really connect theory to practice. And so over a year, people would learn early childhood education, and then we helped them set up childcare businesses in the community so that other people could go to work, right? Because it was a crisis. People were being forced into the workforce and forced to choose between their economic sustainability and the health and well-being of their children, right? And people want both. They want great quality education for their children and economic sustainability, and the law really made them choose. And there just weren't enough quality options, especially in our low-income communities. And so the idea was to really create these little businesses that were grown in neighborhoods, run by neighborhood women, that would be easily accessible, culturally consistent, and would be kind of a triple win, right? Parents would have safe, reliable, quality care. Providers would have an economic sustainability for their families because they would have this new childcare business. And then, of course, most importantly, children have a foundation to succeed in school and life with a rich early learning experiences.
So initially, the women that you dealt with, they were not already business owners. They were people who were on assistance who were really looking to sustain themselves. Correct. As well as offer child care. Correct. So how do you recruit from with that idea?
So back in the day, a lot of the women had their own young children, right? And they wanted to stay home with their young children. And so the idea was that they would stay with their own kids, but then take care of other people's children as well. So they were able to have kind of like a double win, right? They were able to stay home like middle-class women, being with their children in their earliest years of life, but they could also support other women who needed to go to work and didn't have that love of early childhood. And as we grew, we realized that there were a lot of these businesses in the communities that were trying to run these small child cares, but they needed support. And so we created a family child care network that is essentially what we do now. It's a big network across Connecticut that offers support services, education, and training to these small childcare businesses that are run out of people's homes.
So once you began to train these kind of like new entrepreneurs, you found in the community other people who are already offering childcare? Because
exactly.
in the community, particularly African American community, you know, when you got to work, your mom watches them, your aunt watches them, you know, your girlfriend that you knew since you know high school watches them. But they having children And normally it's like, oh, she got 5 kids, she know what she doing. But that's not always the case.
That is exactly true. Right. Right.
What is some of the things that you think were kind of like the big ahas for people in actually learning to care for kids?
Right. Jane and I were just talking about this in the car, that I think most folks teach the way they were taught or teach the way they were raised. And we've learned so much in the last 10 to 20 years on brain development and how important the earliest years, 0 to 3 years, are in a child's brain development, that I think what we try to do at All Our Kin is help people both celebrate the rich history and culture that they have that has worked with raising children, but also make sure that they also know the research that's out there that show effective methods and strategies for working with children. And so I think those are some of the most aha moments, how children's brains grow and how we can really impact them at their earliest lives, how trauma impacts the brain development in children. I'd also say guidance. So another word for guidance is discipline. And so I think some ahas come from realizing that raising your own children is different from taking care of other people's children, and that the strategies you might use with your own kids and disciplining and guiding them are ones you can use with other people's children. And so you have
can't
to
beat people's kids.
Right.
Y'all.
right, exactly. And that there might be even more effective ways of helping children develop self-control that last their entire life. Do you have any other aha moments that people have, Jane?
Well, I see people more from a business perspective, and so I think that for most folks, I think they know more than they think, right? So a lot of sort of financial management, but there's a lot of common sense involved, and so I think the aha moment really for me in my work with them as business people comes when they realize that they actually know, right? That they know a lot more and can be told that you have this knowledge and you need to apply this knowledge in your business.
And when we talk about it from a business perspective, is there apprehension of people kind of like, I don't know if I can be a business owner? Because I find that people find it very scary. As a serial entrepreneur, right? I've been told I start a new business like every year.
It's awesome.
I have no fear. I'm like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Let's just try, right? But I find that when I am talking to people about business, there is a lot of fear in, can I actually be the person to produce money or to gather money as opposed to being someone who is just getting a paycheck? Can I be the person who, and particularly when you start to grow, I am responsible for someone else's lifestyle because I have an employee now. Can I do this? How do the women get over that aspect of starting a business? Because that's what it is, starting a business.
Mm-hmm. So this is incredibly interesting to me, but I don't see as much fear.
Great.
So I am terrified, right? So, and I think, wow, this is so hard. I can't believe that they're doing this. But they are strong women and they are fearless, right? So they know that they can take care of children and that they're great at taking care of children. And I think the business just sort of falls in their laps, right? So, and they're not as focused on being scared about the business part of things. And they know that they can just figure it out, right? So, yeah.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio. Also streaming live on newhavenindependent.org. You're listening to Mornings with Mubarak, where we are talking child care as both a necessity and a means of economic opportunity with All Our Kin. All Our Kin is a child care provider training program in New Haven, Connecticut. And we are talking about the business aspect. So we I mentioned at the beginning of the show that childcare is extremely expensive. But despite this expense, most childcare workers actually are paid poverty rate wages. Um, Nationally, their median wage is less than half the average for a kindergarten teacher, according to a report released July of 2016 by the Center of Study for Childcare Employment. Um, if childcare is so expensive, what's happening in that business transition? Infants cost even more, but childcare providers are paid even less. How does that happen?
Yeah, childcare workers are paid less than almost anyone, and they're doing the most important work I know of. It's a travesty, and I think one of the challenges just is the economics of childcare just don't work because of the people that are involved in childcare and the ratios that are necessary to maintain quality and safety. You need a lot of adults, and a lot of adults cost a lot of money. And so, what ends up happening is that childcare providers end up getting paid low wages, and the early childhood system essentially runs on their foregone wages. So that means that there's only a certain amount of money that parents can pay. And, you know, no one's figured this out, how to provide quality care without it costing a lot of money. And the childcare providers end up being the ones who subsidize the care with their foregone wages.
So I guess the question is that have just we not in the United States not figured it out? Like, how do they do this in other countries and they make it actually a part of the law? How do they do it?
Right, they value families and children more than we do, and I think that's evident in their family leave programs, in their universal childcare. I think we have cities and states that are trying to offer universal childcare, but it tends to be limited, and it tends to be only offered to certain age groups. I think it's
so. In terms of when you say universal childcare, is that state subsidized childcare? How does that work versus?
I think it depends what state. There's we can talk about subsidies as well, because that's something that's really important in Connecticut right now, the child care subsidy. But universal child care is usually state sponsored, and it's open to all families regardless of income. And so in New Haven, we have universal pre-K, and that means that there are pre-K slots in schools, but there aren't enough slots for everyone that wants them. And I believe they're only for 4-year-olds. So you still need to find care for your 3s.
2 and 1 year.
Right. So I think what's hard is that there's a real mixed messages around what the purpose of childcare is for. So is it for care so that a parent can go to work? Is it workforce development and workforce support? Or is it education? And it's both. But I think the way we frame it matters, because when we frame it as a workforce support, we devalue it, and it's a babysitting or daycare. When we talk about it as education, it's laying the foundation for children's later success, and teachers are paid more, the workforce requirements are higher. And I think we as a nation have challenges around both what the purpose is of early childhood education and who should be doing that work. And it's women's work currently, and we know that women's work tends to be, or it doesn't tend to be, it's
Always.
ultimately undervalued the work gets very little respect, dignity, and economic value.
And how does, so when we talk about really changing I guess the language around childcare, so is there so my mother-in-law, I have run a daycare for many years, and I always was curious, what is the difference between when someone refers to themselves as a daycare versus an education center versus is that a part of kind of like trying to change the language around it?
I would say so. A director I know in New Haven likes to say, we don't care for days, we care for children.
I like that.
And some people actually hold on to daycare as a sense of pride. I think it's a debate. But I do think that when someone calls their program a learning center or education program, they're trying to communicate to parents and to stakeholders that learning is happening. And I think that's a real attempt to say this is a different kind of experience. It might not be, because it is just language, but I think that is a communication tool.
With all our kin, is there talk to me a little bit about your training. So are you trying to make the experience actually match the language? Is that one of the goals of all our kin? Or is the goal more about just safely caring for kids?
So we work really hard when someone comes to us, either an auntie, a neighbor, a family friend, a neighbor caregiver, or someone that's always wanted to do childcare. When they come to us, we work really hard at making sure they know how hard the work is, because the last thing we want to do is help license people that really shouldn't be doing the work. The work is really hard. It's a very physical job. It requires patience. It requires your family to be excited about it. And it takes a big investment of resources and finances, that it isn't something to be considered lightly. And so we make sure that folks know that. And then once they're still excited about going through the licensing process with the Office of Early Childhood, we help support them through our Toolkit licensing project, which involves a supportive staff member helping you negotiate the licensing process. And you get all the resources and supplies and supports you need to navigate that process. We don't license, the state does, but we make it a little bit easier, and we'll, help you stay organized and cheerlead for you when you haven't heard for months about your application. And during that process, we really found that people's perception of themselves actually changes, right? They come in and they're like, oh, I want to care for children, I want to babysit. And by the end of this, say, 6-month process, because they're coming to our workshops and our trainings, they're coming to our networking events, they're getting our mailings about all this education. By the end, they're like, hey, I'm actually a professional, I'm a teacher. And so we think that language matters. We call our childcare providers, but they're teachers as well. And the minute they get licensed, they're jazzed and they're ready to be part of Jane's course, her entrepreneurship training series. They want a mentor, educator to come into their home and help them make it an amazing learning play space for children. And they want to get working on their curriculum, and they want to learn about ages and stages of how children grow and learn. And we have all of that at all our kin at each of our sites. And I think another way we value the population that isn't valued is that all of our staff are highly trained, highly experienced. They've all been teachers, or all of our field staff, or finance experts. And we believe that's really important, because childcare is so undervalued that we want to make sure that we only provide the best, most excellent program.
When we talk about, let's talk a little bit about the business part of it, Jane. So people become childcare providers, and then they realize that, okay, not only am I just accepting money, but now I have to get to a point where my money needs to sustain my lifestyle and my family. And how do I do that? So that's when you come in. So when we talk about the statistics of childcare providers, not actually, I had a statistic here that was saying that many child care providers are actually, and I have to look and see what my statistics said, are actually on the public assistance themselves, that they can't even support themselves. So with your, I would assume with your program is to get them not to have to do that.
Right.
Okay. So tell me about your program.
Yeah, so we have sort of two major programs that we do at All Our Kin. And the first of which is the 10-part business series. So this is an actual classroom series that goes for 10 weeks, and each class is 3 hours long. Students learn about contracts, they learn about how to budget, how to set prices, things like that. It's a terrific course. They not only get hardcore knowledge, but they build a community right there. So they can depend on each other as resources.
So let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
Is there a standard kind of like the prices, or is it like just based on each individual, like?
Yeah, it's both. So we approach, when we are talking about setting prices, we approach it actually from both ends. What do you want to achieve? What are your financial goals? But then also, what does the market bear? And a lot of this has to do with how much Care for Kids would pay, for example, because many of our families are on Care for Kids, which is the subsidy.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Care for Kids is a state subsidy? So what is Care for Kids?
So Care for Kids is Connecticut's child care assistance program for low-income families.
Okay.
And this is the way most low-income families pay for child care.
Okay, all right. Which I would assume is lower than what regular child care actually costs.
Right. So So for example, if you were to go to KinderCare, they charge much more than what Care for Kids would subsidize. Right.
So that's interesting, because it actually kind of like loops them back around to having to depend on these independent child care providers who is willing to accept the Care for Kid, as opposed to putting them into a kind of like a private daycare facility like KinderCare or something like that.
So I would flip it a little bit more positively. I would say that childcare centers do accept Care for Kids. So you can take your Care for Kids subsidy and use it at any childcare center, and many local childcare programs in Connecticut accept them. But a lot of families choose family childcare because it's run by people that look like them, are ethnically or racially similar, culturally consistent, linguistically consistent, are in neighborhoods that they can get to, and offer flexible hours, right? A lot of families work second and third shifts. A lot of families don't have 9-to-5 jobs, and family childcare providers actually offer 24-hour care, second and third shift care. They're willing to stay open later, open early. And these are real benefits of family childcare. So
that's not in bigger private.
Exactly. I think another benefit is that you're dropping your child off at a home, and it feels different, and it feels more like you're dropping your child off at grandma's or your neighbor who is like you and has the same values. That isn't always the case, but I think that is one strength of family childcare. So you're right that family childcare providers do accept Care for Kids, but lots of very high quality programs do as well, because they care about equity and they care about making sure that their programs are mixed income and diverse.
Okay.
But you're right in that the rates are low and they do not reflect what providers deserve.
So with the Care for Kids, who makes up the so this is, I guess, the business question. How do providers just say, like, your Care for Kid is going to cover this and then you pay what's additional? Like, how does that work?
Right, there's a parent portion or the family portion of the fee. And so I think that's where we see sort of how big of a difference in the price differential between some of the programs, which could be much higher, and so that the parent portion needs to be much higher. Since there's a cap in how much Care for Kids will pay. And will the family child care provider decrease their prices so that the family portion is small?
Now, is that something that child care providers have to do often, or do they do often in order to kind of like, get kids in the door or provide for kids? And because I would assume that would really impact their finances.
Yep, absolutely. And so, like in any business, right? So price setting is really difficult. And I think in the beginning, people have a sense that if I charge less than other people, I'll get people through the door and I'll have a successful business. We do try to teach folks that you need to understand what your limits are and to set the limits in the places where you need to keep your limits, and so that you can keep a quality business. If you charge too little, you're not going to be able to maintain your business or even provide the care, because you're not going to be able to buy supplies, for example. So yes, I mean, it's a basic business know-how thing, so it doesn't apply just to family child care providers, but to any entrepreneur, I think. Yeah.
I do think one thing that makes the providers that I've worked with special is they're mission driven. They will make exceptions for families. They'll help families out. I have a story of a provider who would make plates for a dad that was a single dad who she knew, he came to pick up his kids and she'd always have a plate of food for him because he came after hours. Or someone who, collects clothes for a single mom who's struggling with homelessness and knows that finding a coat for the baby has been challenging. These are providers who, you're doing it because it's a business, but you have to really love children and care about families and community to do this kind of work, because as you know, the work isn't valued in our society. The wages are not what they should be, but the payoff of helping a child grow and develop and supporting families in crisis, or supporting families who really need that nurturing figure in their life, I think is what sustains a good number of our best providers.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio, also streaming live on newhavenindependent.org. This is Mubaraka, and you're listening to Mornings with Mubaraka, where we are talking to all our kin about childcare and providing quality childcare in Connecticut. I love numbers and stats, and of course all our kin was fortunate to actually see what their impact is by the UConn economic analysis. And I think that this, to me, is important, because anytime I think about an issue like this, and I think about, just from my personal perspective, like, why should I care, right? I don't have any kids in daycare. Let's talk college though next time. And so when you look at the impact that it makes on the larger community, these women being able to not only provide quality childcare, but also to be financially sustainable. And the economic analysis for All Our Kids program said that 60% of participants reported earning at least $5,000 more for the first year after licensing, and 45% earned $10,000 more the second year after licensing. And tell me a little bit about the impact of actually being able to have a sustainable income, and how that impacts the rest of the community.
So I just want to say, one of the things that I try so hard to teach to our providers is the choice, right? So understanding how numbers work, understanding how finances work, gives them the ability to make choices in their business. So it could be that if you're not understanding how your economics work, you can take on more children, and then you hire assistants and realize at the end of the year, hey, I haven't made more money because I've paid my assistant. So I think I try really hard not to prescribe how they need to run their business so much as just understanding their businesses and their finances, so they understand how they can have the ability and the flexibility to make the choices that they want to make. And so along with that, it's not just making choices in their businesses, but it's making choices in their lives as well, right? I've talked to providers who, by choice, decide not to have the maximum number of kids because they are choosing a certain type of lifestyle, or others who will actually maximize their income because that's what they want to do, right? And so, I don't know, for me, that's a powerful thing that I can give back to the community.
When we talk about the economic impact of the community, the UConn analysis also said for every $1 spent on the All Our Kin toolkit, that it adds approximately 15 to 20 in return to society in terms of gross regional product. What does that mean in layman's terms?
So the way I understand it is that, and I'm going to look to my finance guru, Zarina, over here, but I understand that to mean that because the providers are opening businesses, they're paying taxes, they're buying goods, their doors are open for families to then go to work, who then have money to buy goods, and it's like a win on many levels. And so every dollar that's invested in the All Our Kin program ends up paying 15-fold. Is that how you would describe it?
I completely, It's not only the impact of the provider, it's the employees that they hire, and their families who can now go to work because they have childcare. Then it just multiplies down the road. Yeah.
So it just multiplies. So, and that's a huge return. $15 to $20 for every $1 spent. So we have about 5 minutes left to the show. First, talk to me a little bit about what message would you like to leave people with of the importance of childcare as an issue altogether, and then tell me how people can get in touch with you and get involved in your program.
Okay, I can go first. I'll tell you that through my story, which is why I care about early childhood education. I care about educational equity. Born and raised in New Haven, went to public school here my whole life, and I got the best out of the system. But a lot of friends and a lot of students didn't. And that's wrong. And every child deserves access to the best early start possible. And equity in education and educational opportunity actually begins at birth, when children don't have access to quality interactions and quality early childhood. And we know that brains are built from day one, And the science tells us how important the earliest years are. They really build the foundation for everything else. So if we care about educational opportunity, we have to care about early childhood, because early childhood actually is the foundation of the house that everything else is built upon. So investment in quality early learning experiences impacts everyone, even folks who don't have young children, right? Because these are the future workers of tomorrow, and they're the kids that will be in your kids' classrooms, right? And so we're all interconnected in that way. And that's, I think why all of us at Aller can do it. We see children not getting the kinds of early starts that they deserve. And the truth is those that can pay get the best. And that's just wrong. And every day we go to work fighting for every child's excellent beginning.
Yeah. And I just want to say, so having children, and especially multiple children, a lot of women are driven out of the workforce. A lot of families can maybe afford childcare for one child, and then by the time you have your second or third, it's thousands of dollars per month, and so that drives women out of the workforce. This is one way for us to bring those women back to the workforce, and also to multiply the effect by helping other women get back into the workforce. I think it's a really powerful model. So.
Mubaraka, I would just put a plug into your listeners. We talked a little bit about Care for Kids. Just to remind them, it's Connecticut's Child Care Assistance Program for low-income families. It's facing a really serious crisis. Care for Kids was closed to most new applications in January 2017. And as a result, this means that they're now assisting about 5,800 fewer children than it was 6 months earlier. And this hurts children who need access to childcare and low-income families trying to find work and childcare programs that serve these children. And so cutting childcare, Care for Kids hurts kids, families, and in the end it will hurt Connecticut because childcare providers may need to close, and that's childcare centers as well as our family childcare providers. And I would just encourage your listeners who care about childcare, who care about families and children, to talk to their state legislatures and ask them to include full funding for Care for Kids in the state budget. We need folks to call them and really advocate for full funding.
How can people get in touch with you?
They could visit our website at www.allourkin.org. We have a very active Facebook page. And all of our emails are our first name at allourkin.org.
Okay, well, that is easy to remember. allourkin.org, not common-people.org. Okay. Thank you so much,
Thank
ladies.
you so much.
Thank
This was so much
you.
fun. Thank you
Awesome.
for highlighting childcare and the importance of it.
Awesome, definitely. I learned a lot. This is one of the reasons why I really do. I love doing programs where I actually learn, because in the research of the show and then talking to the guests, I'm like, wow, I was like in the dark here. If you've been listening, you have been listening to Mornings with Mubaraka on WNHHLP 103.5 FM. Until next week, I'm reminding you to be a voice and not an echo. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yay,
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
You had really well prepared.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've been trying to do a little bit